It won't come as a shock to many that housing prices in Canada are starting to show signs of cracking. Today, I'm going to tell you how bad it could get and what you can do to protect yourself. Now, I've not lived in Canada. I'm not Canadian. I'm not an economist. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm the Nomad capitalist, and we talk about how people can legally protect and diversify their money overseas. But one thing I've been watching as we've been helping many Canadian clients, including many who've been concerned about the direction their country's going, is that prices in Canada have been going sky high, even as Canada has shut down immigration routes for foreign investors like the Chinese, who would often use those purchases to move to Canada. That's become more difficult in almost the last decade. And so I looked at all the different factors, and I looked at all the different investment opportunities that we see overseas, and I said, what's happening in Canada probably isn't sustainable. And I'm going to tell you exactly what some experts in Canada have to say about it, and then I'm going to tell you how you can protect yourself if you own property in Canada. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We are a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors, including many Canadians, legally go where you're treated best, everything from lowering your taxes to diversifying and protecting your assets so that you're not subject to whatever happens in one country, and to increasing your freedoms, because we've seen that freedom is on the decline in many Western countries. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Let me share with you an article from the Globe and Mail in Canada. Here's the headline: Canadian house prices could drop by 25% by the end of 2023, says a report. Rochelle Junglai says Canada's average home price could drop by as much as 25% from peak values in February by the end of next year, with the Maritimes and most of Ontario shouldering greater declines owing to the sharp jump in borrowing costs, as a new private sector forecast. Since the Bank of Canada starting raising interest rates in March to rein in inflation, the country's housing market has slowed considerably. Sales volumes have plummeted, and the average home price is down 18.5% from February to June, according to the Canadian real estate data. We talk to a lot of folks in Canada. We have friends in Canada. We hear what's happening, and including in the real estate space, where they're saying, yeah, people were offering over asking price. They were rushing to make offers. Now you're seeing people relist properties. They're lowering prices. They're being more flexible, in some cases in very embarrassing ways. And what I want to draw your attention to is this. As someone who grew up in the United States, I know folks where I'm from, and perhaps a lot of folks in Canada and many Western countries, have this mentality that everything will just all work out. It has to work. And in my business, I think one of the reasons why we've been successful is because I take, I don't want to say a pessimistic view, but what do pessimists say? We say that we're realists. And I say, listen, just because we've been successful doesn't mean we've always been successful. We've got to keep innovating. We've got to keep doing new things. We've got to stay sharp and on our game. And sometimes we'll bring in younger people into the company who are like, well, I'm sure it'll bounce back. It always has. There's no guarantee things will always bounce back. Just look at the market. Some of the folks we talk to in Canada are millennials who are complaining. These are our friends. That, hey, it's harder for us to afford a home than our parents. And they're pretty disenchanted. We may not agree on everything economically, but they're very disenchanted. And what they're saying is, the jobs that we have don't pay much more than our parents' jobs, and yet housing prices are a lot higher. And so that's what's happening in a lot of the Western world. You're seeing the places where I live, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, they're getting a lot of the jobs. You're seeing companies in the US and Canada move production increasingly to Mexico. Just another company last week. You're seeing, I've always quoted Steve Bannon, who advised Donald Trump. He said, we hollowed out the middle class in the in the United States to build a middle class in Asia. I see nothing wrong with that, by the way. I live with in Asia. I think Asians should have a middle class. Why should North America have all the largesse so that people can just live fat and happy, just getting high-paying jobs without a lot of expertise, the way it used to be? Well, everyone else in the world suffers. The world has changed. The world that I went to elementary school in, the Chinese were riding bicycles. Not a lot of bicycles in Shanghai these days. They've become wealthier, and people have marginally become less wealthy in places like Canada and the United States. And so how sustainable is it with that prices are going to remain at these astronomical levels? And yet people believe that things will just always bounce back. This is Canada. This is the US. No doubt they've bounced back many times before. Empires don't last forever. Success isn't guaranteed. And the idea that there was a time in North America when you could graduate from high school, not really know that much, get a good paying factory job, have 2 cars, live in a nice house in the suburbs, have plenty of money for the cinema on the weekend, that's gone. Whether you like it or not, that's gone. And why is it that you would think that things in Canada and the US always have to come back? Why are they somehow different than all the other countries in the world? Because you were born there? That's nonsense. The article continues. Consequently, the Desjardins Group said that it had to drastically revise its forecast because the market was correcting faster than it anticipated. They predicted the market would correct. It was correcting faster. In June, economists there predicted a 15% decline in the average price from February to the end of 2023. Now they predict 20 to 25%. So basically as much as a 60% increase in the decline is predicted in just a matter of a couple months that they predicted it. Home prices, they say, continue to fall and have further to go before they find a bottom, say the economists in a research note. They said the central bank is raising rates more aggressively than anticipated, which will continue to increase borrowing costs. The Bank of Canada's benchmark interest rate now up 2.5%, with inflation clocking in at 8.1% in June. The bank is expected to continue to raise interest rates. And so if you live in these Western countries, there's really nowhere to go. I give the example recently in Malaysia. Gas prices, petrol prices, under $2 US a gallon at the same day that it was $3.99 in the United States, higher certainly in Canada. And so inflation has, I think, risen those prices a little bit in Malaysia, but Malaysia is actually focused on helping its people. Malaysia is actually focused on bringing people who are foreigners to come and live and offering tax incentives and being friendly to them and encouraging them to come and bring their knowledge, whereas countries like Canada just aren't. Countries like Canada are the old Gavin Newsom, where else are you going to go? And we've seen more Canadians than ever in the last couple of years who are saying, yeah, I want to go somewhere else. I want to get out. Taxes are going up. If you're successful, they're coming after you. Private sector job creation is essentially flat compared to government and public sector job creation. It's much more up in the public sector. They're creating a lot more government jobs than they're creating entrepreneurs. And so that's perhaps in a very marginal sense because entrepreneurs are leaving, and it's because people just don't want to be entrepreneurs anymore. There's not a big incentive. If people are not going to live their dreams in Canada, why do you want to stay there? And so what does that mean for housing prices? What does that mean for your taxes? What does that mean for the entire macro environment? One of the things they mentioned in this article is due to the rise in interest rates. A lot of the places where I buy property, much of the property is bought in cash. People pay cash. Interest rates don't affect the property markets nearly as much. And so compare that to North America, where you see a substantial increase in borrowing costs. You're going to see property prices fall off the roof. It's not necessarily going to happen in a country, I talked to George Gammon, for example, in Colombia or many other Latin American countries. You're going to see low double digits of percentages of properties with mortgages on them in some of those countries. And so if you're buying in Colombia, if you're buying in some countries in Southeast Asia, we've talked about Cambodia, for example. I mean, 30 years, basically no recession besides the COVID-induced 2020 declines, right? Those markets have a lot of room to go up, and they've got demographics on their side, and they've got people coming in and investing who actually are adding value rather than people who are just speculating, right? People who maybe walk away from some of those properties and make things even worse. And so if I'm looking for a place to invest, I might want to take, and what I've asked some people the question, I don't give financial advice. We do help people set up their offshore structures. We help people figure out their second passports. We help people figure out where to move. We help people do all that kind of stuff with our network of attorneys and accountants and everybody else that around the world. But I'm not going to tell someone whether they should sell their house. But I've asked the question, you think housing prices are going to go up more, or do you think they're going to go down? And if they're going to go down and you don't want to live in your country anymore, when will they come back up? Over 400 cities in the United States have not gotten back to Great Recession levels, pre-GFC levels. They haven't gotten back. I think 470 some cities in the United States. Some of those cities you've probably never heard of, right? They're certainly not some of the popular cities, right? I mean, Miami, they're back, right? Lots of places that are tax friendly have been going through the roof, both in the U.S. And outside, right? In Dubai, property prices almost doubled in the last year and a half because people want to go there. They want to be left alone. They want their money to stay theirs. And yet, look at how many places in a country where everyone thinks, oh, property's only gone through the roof. Hundreds and hundreds of cities in the United States, right next door to Canada, obviously, haven't even gotten back to where they were 13 or 14 years ago, 15 years ago. And so there will be places in Canada that suffer that. And how long before it comes back? Now, if you want to stay in Canada for the rest of your life, if you say, hey, listen, what a great place to start a business. The government doesn't regulate us. The taxes are very reasonable. I know that they're going to leave me alone. I know it's a great place to be. The weather's fantastic. Then by all means, stay there. And I won't judge you for that. But if you're one of the many folks who says taxes are crazy, the policies they've enacted are just out of control, they're going to come for more of our wealth, it's less and less free here, then you might want to consider hey, the getting was pretty good just a matter of months ago before this all started. And you could have sold your property for top dollar. And you could have taken that. I know people who have $1 million plus in equity in their home. You could have taken that and bought a really nice house somewhere overseas, gotten a residence permit or even a citizenship with that. Nobody says you couldn't come back to Canada and buy a property in the future with very little money down, using all the leverage that Canadian banks have to offer. But you could have taken that equity before potentially, I thought eventually prices would go down, and put that somewhere else and have some diversification. Because no matter what, if you're a millionaire, people were millionaires just because of their house equity. But if you're a millionaire, you should have some form of risk mitigation, right? That speaks to the fact that your country isn't always guaranteed to be number one, isn't always guaranteed to be a good investment, isn't always guaranteed to go up. And we've seen an entire generation of people, a little bit younger than I am, who have never really seen a recession as an adult. And now they're going to see what it's like to see housing prices drop 25%. Does this allow some younger people to get in and get into the action? Yeah, potentially it does. I did that. I bought a property in the United States. I think happened to be the lowest month on record in my market to buy property. Because I thought, hey, prices are getting pretty darn cheap. I want to travel a lot, but I might as well, while I have this base in the U.S., I might as well have a house. But if you own a house at top dollar, if you don't want to stay there, you could sell it and rent. You could sell it and buy property overseas. If you move overseas to live in that property overseas and you buy it in a tax-friendly place, you could dramatically reduce your cost of living. You could dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, your tax obligations. You could get rid of your mortgage by paying for it with the cash from the equity. You could reduce your costs by 70 or 80%. And wouldn't it be a good place to build up your savings, build up money to invest in your business, build up money to put into your portfolio, build generational wealth? That's hard to do in Canada these days. Even if you're making $1 million. I talk to people making $1 million in Canada, and I can tell you, they're living relatively normal lives. No doubt they're making more money than most people in Canada. And no doubt they have a good amount of financial security, but they are not exactly living the high life in many cases. They can do that in a lot of the places that we talk about. And so the article continues talking about an exact average price decline of 24%, values dropping 22% in Toronto, 27% in the rest of the province. And so they talk about how it will make it more affordable, but they're seeing declines. I think the least one is 11% in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so that's from the Globe and Mail. My point is, you've got to decide whether you want to stay in Canada forever, in which case, listen, your price goes up, it goes down. Don't expect just because you're in Canada, prices always go up. The government can stop foreign investment, and they've taken some measures to do stuff like that. The government can they can apply a wealth tax on you. They can apply an unrealized capital gains tax. They can take a big chunk of tax when you sell the property and make that more expensive. They can do all kinds of things to you at any time because you're a sitting duck. Your money's all right there. They can do whatever you want. That's why I believe in diversification. But if you want to live there and you're cool with that, then that's okay. You should do nothing. You should just expect that prices don't always go up. But if you think that, hey, maybe Canada's not the only answer, that there's other places where you could live more affordably, or at least get a lot more value for your money, you could keep more of your money in taxes, then maybe this is the opportunity, if you can still get a decent price for your house, to at least consider. Don't take my advice for it. Don't do it because I said so. But at least consider the fact that, hey, this could be an opportunity to put some money in, build up into a new house, build some liquidity, and start a new life somewhere else. It's a new adventure.